now. Thank you very much to everyone who's joined so far. I'm sure we'll get some more people joining in a minute as well. Um, just to note, this webinar is being recorded, and then we can send out the recording and the slide deck to everyone afterwards. So please just note that. Today, it's the third webinar in our PR on Demand series. Today, we're hosted by Bethany Joy. We'll start with the presentation from Beth first, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end as well. Beth has 15 years experience in marketing, branding, and communications, and she runs her own business as a brand voice consultant. She also runs Marketing Camp, which is a monthly meetup for marketers working in small businesses across Oxfordshire. So if anyone's qualified for today's talk, it's certainly Bethany. So I will hand over to you now to take us into the world of branding and brand voices.
Great. Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much. And hi, everyone. It is a bit strange not being able to see anyone's faces, but never mind. I must admit, I've gotten really used to that. I've really enjoyed that after 2 years of lockdown, the last few months, getting back into face-to-face and actually being able to see people rather than just looking at your own face while you present, which is a very disconcerting experience. But never mind. I'll ignore that box and just focus on what we're talking about. So thank you, Anna, for that introduction. At least that means I don't have to give you a bio myself of who I am and what I do. If you're anything like me, actually, you probably sort of slightly glaze over those bits anyway when you go to a webinar and the person spends the first 5 minutes telling you all about their work history. If you do want to know a little bit more about what I do day to day or what my experience is, and my role now, then obviously feel free to go back to the Zoom registration link, and it's got a short bio and a link to my website and stuff like that. So feel free to fill your boots. But for now, I will just focus on the content that we're going to share today. So I am just going to kick off really quickly with a very brief rundown of how we're going to spend our time, just so you know what to expect over the next 45 minutes, and then we will get stuck in. So we are just going to really quickly start off by looking at what actually brand voice is. What do we mean when we say brand voice? I mean, I'm assuming that people have got at least a rough idea, or else you probably wouldn't have come along to the webinar, but just want to flesh out that understanding a little bit and make sure that we're all on the same page for the rest of the webinar. So just a couple of minutes devoted to that. Then we are going to just zoom in on exactly why brand voice is particularly relevant for PR, why it's relevant generally. Just a couple of minutes on that. Then we are going to have a little look at some voices from the wild. So I always think it's good as quickly as possible to move things away from the theory of me just telling you things to actually looking at some real life examples and looking at some different ways in which brands are communicating and kind of see what lessons we can draw from that. So some things to look at and some reflections. And then hopefully we're going to spend sort of the bulk of the time at the end, assuming I don't get carried away. I do tend to get a bit carried away in the examples and enjoy looking into the language a bit too much. So I'll try and rein that in so that we can spend the bulk of the time actually looking at some steps, some kind of broader process for if you actually want to think about making brand voice stuff a reality in the company that you work for. How do you go about doing that? Because that, of course, is the key of all of this. It's all very well for people to give you examples and definitions and all those things, but actually, if you want to do something different in your day job tomorrow as a result of this, and you want to start putting this into action, how do you do it? So we're going to go through that at the end, and then obviously a chance for questions. So if there's things I've missed out or we haven't had time to cover, then that's your opportunity. So hopefully that sounds okay. I'm just imagining you all nodding enthusiastically. Just going to pretend that that's what's happening. So let's start off with what brand voice is. Well, there's obviously a very straightforward, very top level, very literal definition of brand voice, which very simply just is describing the way in which a brand communicates. So same with humans. We have a voice, we talk to one another. Brands are exactly the same, whether that's literal talking, presentation, or whether it's writing, all the different written communications a brand has. It's just literally describing the way in which we go about those, the way in which we communicate. And I think it is a helpful term in slightly distinguishing between a brand's message and a brand's voice. So i.e. the content of what you're sharing, what you're talking about, versus how you're talking about it, the style in which you speak and write. I think that is a helpful distinguishing there. So brand voice as opposed to brand message. But I actually think that with brand voice, the more interesting thing beyond that sort of top line definition is that I see brand voice as kind of capturing a interesting phenomenon that we are very aware of in our day-to-day life when we engage kind of human to human and when we talk to other people, whether in a personal or a professional context. But it's a phenomenon that I think we're slightly less quick to recognize and to see the value of in a business context, in a brand to consumer context. And that phenomenon is simply that when we communicate, we are actually doing more than just conveying information. We are also giving people a bit of a glimpse into what we're like as people. Certainly on a human to human level, we experience that all the time. We meet new people, we come to a webinar and listen to the first 2 or 3 minutes, we meet a new colleague at work, we have these little snapshots of conversations with people. And even after a minute or two, as well as the actual information that is being conveyed, we tend to leave with at least a small sense of what that other human being is like, whether they're a human being we're drawn to or not, whether they're someone we'd happily meet again or talk further with or spend more time with, or whether they're someone we prefer to avoid or never see again. Even at that most basic level, those human to human interactions, we get that. We have that sense of there's more than just the actual words that are being shared. There's something else, there's a bigger picture here. And I think we're just not always quite as quick to really be aware of that as brands, to understand that that is also happening when brands communicate, whether it's writing on your website, sending out emails, social media, face-to-face conversation, over the phone, billboard, TV ad, whatever it is. When a brand communicates, there's sort of 2 layers. There is that what you're saying, what you're telling people about who you are and what you do and what your product or service is. And then there's what's sort of underneath that, the impression that people are left with of what you're like. And I just want to give actually a super quick example of that, just to make that really tangible. We'll look at some longer examples properly later, but just super quick for now. So just thinking for a second about what is the most obvious main piece of communication that pretty much every brand in the world has now: a website. And one of the most basic pages, maybe not even a page, maybe just a section that pretty much every website is going to have, a contact us section or form. Pretty simple. Brands telling you how you can talk to them. Okay, pretty basic. Pretty much everyone's doing it. As messaging goes, very simple. And yet you'll see in these examples that I bring up, even in that most simple piece of communication, there's actually plenty of space for personality to come across. There's actually plenty of space for the language we choose to be working harder than just communicating information. Since essentially on most contact pages, the information is, if you would like to get in touch with us, here's how. So super quick look, these are just screenshots from a couple of random business websites. So first one, standard, phone and email for work, Twitter and Instagram for fun. And then the details are listed beneath that. Have a word. Hit the button below. You don't need me to tell you that, but the page looks nicer with some words here. Get in touch. Have we whetted your appetite? Take another bite and get in touch. We'd love to help make your next creative project simple, fun, and just an overall roaring success. You know these guys. Contact the Ritz, London. You can be assured of the most prompt and personal attention with any inquiry. Or this one, Better Together. I enjoy working with dedicated creatives from businesses that make the world beautiful. We can do so much together. Let's talk. And details. So let's just go back and look at those for a second. So simple, so straightforward, literally just a call to action of getting in touch and a list of contact details. But even in these really small places, I bet that on reading those without knowing the businesses, different elements, just little peaks, little teasers of personality start to come through. This first one up in the top left, the pink one, I think there's a really nice tone there of a little bit irreverent, a little bit of a sort of smirk you can imagine them saying with kind of standard, phone and email for work, Twitter and Instagram for fun. They're a little bit edgy, a little bit of a cool brand. As it happens, they're a PR brand, so they are a little bit like that. But that's literally, I don't even know how many words that is, but about 10 words, and already you've got that sense of a particular personality coming through. Differently in the grey below, a little bit more of a almost a sort of stream of consciousness, slightly pondery sort of personality. Have a word, hit the button below. You don't need me to tell you that, but the page looks nicer with some words here. Get in touch. You know, friendly, nice, but a little bit sort of slightly meandery, whereas that first one, very direct, very straight down the line. This one on the right, the yellow, have we whetted your appetite? Take another bite, get in touch. We'd love to help make your next creative project fun, simple, an overall roaring success. That much more sort of enthusiastic, positive, happy, really, really nice kind of coming out of the screen to get you kind of friendliness. Very different from the meandering friendliness of the grey one and the more kind of take it or leave it, cool edginess of the pink one. So again, not very many words, very simple, just little bits of personality starting to peek through already. This was a bit of a giveaway because you can see the brand, but again, everything you would expect from the Ritz in terms of that slightly more formal tone, but very much kind of quality, premium, luxury, a bit more reserved, almost like it's your butler speaking to you, if you had a butler, which I'm assuming most of you don't. Contact the Ritz London. You can be assured of the most prompt and personal attention with any inquiry. So very different from those more laid back, chatty, kind of get in touch types, more formal contact, assured, prompt inquiry, but really sets that sort of luxury, high quality tone. And then the final one, just a much, you can tell this is a real sort of almost deep thinking, inspired sort of person. You know, I enjoy working with dedicated creatives from businesses that make the world beautiful. We can do so much together. Let's talk. So much more sort of thoughtful, creative type. So very, very simple, but just really showing us straight away, I hope, that idea of brand voice being not just what you say, but how you say it, that even at the simplest level with things where you'd think contact page, pretty straightforward, how many different ways can you say it, that actually even there's huge opportunity to give people a sense of what you're like. Now, the key question, why does that matter? So it's all very well to say, oh yes, how nice, those contact pages have shown people a bit of our personality as an organization. Who cares? Now, I think that consumers care. Not, I want to be clear about this, not specifically about you having a brand voice. I don't think consumers are particularly aware of that or particularly care. But what I do think is that increasingly now, the world that we live in, i.e. an oversaturated one with lots of businesses, lots of brands, lots of content, lots of communication, that actually when people are making decisions about who to buy from, where to buy things, that actually they are looking for points of connection. They are looking for something that stands out to them, that resonates with something of the way they are, the way we are as humans. There's a whole nother podcast in this. There's a lot of stuff that marketers like to wang on about relationships, building relationships with your customers, and we have to be in a relationship with a brand. I mostly think that is really unhelpful BS. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear in this webinar, but I mostly think that's total rubbish. I don't think people are in relationship with brands who sell them toilet paper. I just don't think that's true. But I do really do think it's true that we just like how we build relationships on a human level, that we are drawn towards brands and products and services that seem like there's something behind them that connects, that resonates with something about the way we view the world. You know, there's a brand that seems to have a particular sense of humor that is the same as ours, or there's a brand that has an attitude or approach to something that we go, oh yeah, that's how I feel about that. I think we are looking for those things. That don't get me wrong, I don't think it's the sole thing. I think when we make decisions about where to buy, there's a whole host of things at play. There's price, location, quality, features, functionality, all of those things are in play. I do think that. But I think that absolutely in the mix is this sense of what are these people like? What is this brand like? What's the, for want of a more scientific term, what's the vibe that I'm getting from this company? I do think that has a massive impact in why people buy. I think that both personally, experientially, and actually from what I've seen in years of work in marketing. And so what that kind of distills down to for me, I think of two reasons why that's particularly relevant in the context of PR, are these two ideas: connection and consistency. So it's the first point is really just exactly what I was saying, that when we think about PR, whether we think about creating different opportunities to be in the press, if it's articles or editorials, whether it's digital campaigns, whatever the thing is, there definitely is a tendency to really, really focus on message and to be really thinking about what are the things we need to be communicating about our particular product or service. Or obviously a lot of PR is more generally about wider brand building, even what are the things we need to tell people about us. And that often what's missing is this not telling but showing. How do we decide not just what we want to say, but how we want to say it, so that when people come across us in these bits of press or campaigns or advertising or whatever, they are not just taking away the thing that we do, the thing that we offer, but they're actually getting a sense of who we are, that we're offering them these points of connection. Because the reality is that we are in a situation where, I mean, okay, I don't know who's in the room right now, but I would love to talk to you afterwards if you are honestly convinced that you are working for a company that offers a product or service that is genuinely unique. Because it's very rare. I'm under no illusions that what I do is unique. There are plenty of other people who work as brand voice consultants out there in the world. Almost everything that is available in multiples. So there might be some particular unique element to what you do, but the chances are, for most of us, that we're working for a company that offers a service or a product that has at least significant similarities to other products or services on the market. And so the thing that's different, the thing that you need to be able to sort of go one step further than just telling them what you offer is, how do we create these points of connection, of helping them feel like, okay, I could buy dog food from any one of 50 companies, but these guys, the way they talk about what they do, the way they present dogs and their humans, the way they particularly talk about their food, that mirrors how I feel and how I see the world and how I engage with things. Even if you're not thinking about that on a particularly explicit, conscious level, that those points of connection are really significant. So that's the first thing I think is so important. And then it's a slightly more sort of boring point, but nonetheless, I think very relevant, that there is an issue of consistency. That actually, if we don't take the time to think carefully about our organizational identity and developing a language that presents that clearly, then we are going to struggle to appear the same, to be the same in every context that people come across us. And so we are running the risk of people maybe being initially drawn in by an ad on Facebook or an advertorial in a magazine or an interview they hear on the radio, and then following that through and going to our website or social media or blogs or whatever, and actually being met with a company that feels and sounds quite different. And I mean, that's a problem actually, not just in the context of PR, but generally in the context of business, that actually these days most brands have multitudes of touch points, different potential places for customers to come across you. And so in PR, as in all those things, there is a significance in how can we come across the same, how can we be the same in all of these places, and paying attention to your voice as a brand and developing that, thinking that through and outworking that in each of those places helps to bring that consistency. Again, bringing it back to how we interact as humans, I think it would probably be quite off-putting if you meet another human at a party, say, and you spend 10 minutes chatting and you think, I really liked them, they were really fun, I definitely hope I see them again, they're great. And then 2 weeks later, you happen to bump into them, I don't know, at a work event, and they come across like a completely different person. That would actually be quite disconcerting. And you'd be thinking, were they just a bit drunk at that party? Maybe, like, is that not really who they are? It definitely forces a kind of disconnect. And certainly it doesn't build trust. It makes you sort of doubt, do I really know this person? What are they really like? And it is exactly the same with businesses, that if there's not consistency in how you present yourself, it brings that disconnect. So it disrupts those moments of connection, and it also does not help to build trust. And as all good marketers know, we know that trust and recognition are very key points along a buyer's journey in engaging with us. So there's myriad reasons why I think brand voice is important, but I think connection and consistency are two of the most significant. Now, let's have a look at a few more examples. Like I said before, I just think it's really helpful to take this out of the realm of the theoretical and actually sit and look at, even more than just contact pages, a couple of different pieces of communication from various brands, and actually drill down into, okay, what kind of personality is coming across here? How have they developed their language to help us see something of who they are and what they're like, and what kind of effect is that having? So I've got 3 different sets of examples. And what I've done actually is that all 3 of them are from quite different sectors, quite different types of businesses. But for each set, there's 2 examples, and within that, those 2 businesses are competitors. Essentially, they're in the same space, offering very similar service or very similar product. But I've chosen ones that have very different personalities and voices, so that we can see even more clearly how much, even when you're talking about a very similar sort of thing, it's possible to do it in a way that gives a very different feel, a very different sense of personality and identity. So neither is right or wrong. I haven't picked sort of good or bad. I've picked ones where I think actually they're all great. They're all really good examples of strong brand voices. They're just very different from one another. So I have to admit, normally when I do this stuff live, I like to try and make this bit kind of interactive and actually get you to sort of chip in and share your thoughts about what impressions you get. But obviously I can't see you, so I can't do that. So I'm sorry, it is going to be a bit more of me sort of talking at you. But if you have a pressing thing that you really want to share, I know that I guess there's a comment section. So, and I guess you can keep an eye on that. And if someone has something really pressing they want to share or to ask, then go for it. And Anna, you can just sort of wave your hand at me and interject. But mostly I will just talk us through these. So the first ones we're going to look at are period products. Fun times. So again, I can't see the mix in the group. I'm assuming there's both men and women here. Women, you might be familiar with some of these. Men, I'm guessing maybe not, but doesn't matter. The exercise is still the same. So we're going to be looking at 2 brands. They're just little screenshots again, screen grabs of content from their websites. I'll read them both out to you, and then we'll have a little look and delve down into the language a bit. So this first one is a brand called Flow, and this is from their sort of, I think it might be an about bit or a sort of intro bit on the website. Our Flowmatic subscription packs are delivered free, straight to your door each month, making your period a little bit easier. No more, oops, is it here already? I'm out of tampons moments. Plus, our tampons are made from 100% GOT certified organic cotton. So they're sustainable, reliable, hypoallergenic, and comfy as heck. And then the second brand, just realizing, hopefully you can see all these, and these little squares of us aren't in the way. Second brand is a brand called On. Get your period products delivered through your door for free, babe, every damn cycle. Whether you're after organic tampons that are as naked as the plant they came from, read bleach free, just the way your vagina likes them, or something to soothe your cramps, we've got your back. 100% organic and 100% bullshit free, period products for when you're bleeding, game-changing cycle care for when you're not. So, first of all, let's all just move on past the fact that I bet you did not expect to be talking about vaginas in this webinar. What a fun day. So again, I can't see people's faces, I can't see reactions, whatever, but hopefully what you're feeling is that this is actually a really interesting example. This is probably one of the strongest of the examples of an area where the 2 brands are actually offering and talking about almost identical services. So here, both of these period brands offer subscription packs of tampons. So you can order and they come through your door every month. Both of them offer free delivery, and both of them have a big emphasis on organic tampons made from organic cotton. They both don't both mention the GOT certified, but 100% organic. So content-wise, message-wise, incredibly similar offering. And although it's not listed here, I'm pretty sure price point-wise, very similar as well. And they'll deliver to anywhere. So far, so similar. But in terms of the style, the personality behind each one and the voice, they're actually very different. So we've got our first one, Flow, is a much more kind of warm, friendly, it's almost that sort of your best friend in the toilet stall next door, like, oh crap, my period's here, can you pass a tampon under the door? Kind of all these sort of, oops, is it here already? I'm out of tampons. It's very chatty, relational. And they're quite sort of simple with the language, delivered free, straight to your door, making your period easier, sustainable, reliable. So they've got a nice sort of clear practical tone, but then they also throw in these little, you know, sustainable, reliable, comfy as heck. So there's a very, yeah, just a very casual, very friendly kind of style. I think that they are aimed, I would say, generally at just an ever so slightly younger, more sort of late teens, university students kind of. One of the things on their website is that actually you can buy their tampons in like a little tub that looks like an ice cream tub. So there's just a lot of those kind of fun elements. It's all about this, not just practically making your period easier, but almost just making it a bit more fun, a bit more friendly, a bit more like flows, is again playing on that kind of art flows come to stay, you know, the sort of casual, friendly, supportive kind of vibe is what comes through in that language. Whereas On are much more aggressive, I would say, much more very straight down the line language, not really, they've got this sort of supportive element, but it's supportive more in a kind of empowering, slightly sort of angry women at a march kind of vibe, rather than best friend in the toilet next door kind of vibe. So they've got this, you know, for free babe, let's all move past whether or not you like to be addressed as babe. Personally, I don't. This is not the brand for me, but that's okay. Whether or not we personally actually like these is not particularly relevant, because if we're not in the target audience, then that doesn't really matter. So they've got this still casual, it's not particularly formal language. Then there's an element of that speaking to you like you're someone they know, but just in a much more assertive kind of way. And they've got sort of, you know, every damn cycle, that kind of stuff in there. The feeling with them, I think, is a real sort of 2 fingers up to the patriarchy kind of, don't tell me that I shouldn't talk about periods in public. And they've been very bold with the language: naked, vagina, bleeding, period. You know, they're breaking taboos, they're saying it like it is. So just a nice example, very, very similar offering and very, very similar thing that's being described, but very different feel for both of them. And depending on what type of personality you are, and what type of thing you're drawn to, actually picking between these two, if all those other things are the same, price and delivery and what they're offering and how they're offering it, actually what might make the difference is which one of these actually feels more like what I'm like, or what I want out of a brand. So I think the personality element is very strong in those two. Totally different. Oh, there we go. Totally different now. 2 brands in the sort of end of life planning and wills kind of sector. So first brand called Kinherit. Life is complex and hectic, and it's all too easy to forget the need to plan for the future. We all have wishes. We want to pass on the things we've built and the things we've earned to our family, friends, and loved ones. But a wish without a will is an empty promise. It's something that has no power. We set up Kinherit to make sure your wishes become real. Second company called Dead Happy. So, what do you want to happen when you die? Do you want Rick Astley to sing at your funeral? A bronze statue of yourself for the garden? Or perhaps send your mates on holiday? It's your call. You just need to think about what you want, put plans in place, and share them with the people who need to know. Or, as we like to put it, create and share a death wish. Now, again, reasonably similar. I mean, the 2 companies do offer slightly different things, and in terms of the products and services, there are some differences, but both of them will help you with end of life planning and will help you make some decisions about what you want to happen when you die. But clearly, they're aiming at a very different sort of person, and that is clear from the language that they're using. So Kinherit is a much more sort of safe, reliable, family friendly. It's kind of a lot of the standard language that you'd expect from the industry, but I think done nicely. They haven't put too much jargon in there. It's not too formal. It's very much, it's all too easy to forget the need. We've all got wishes. We all want, you know, they're using that first person plural. So they're not saying you need to do this, saying we all do that, you know, we understand, we get it, we all have wishes, but we want to make sure that it actually happens. We want to help you. So that really nice, supportive, inclusive kind of feel. Lots of that nice language around passing on the things we've built and the things we've earned. So kind of playing to that feeling of like, oh yes, I have worked hard and I have got money and property and things that I care about, and I want to make sure my family get them, you know, some quite emotive language in there. Completely different from Dead Happy, who are much more irreverent, and much more sort of focused on, dare I say it, the fun, not the fun side, the light-hearted side of, you know, at the end of the day, we're all going to die. There's no point pretending that's not going to happen. So hey, what do you want to do about it? You know, the sort of, we only get one life. How are you going to end yours? What's going to happen? Do you want something cool at your funeral? Get a bronze statue. Hey, it's totally your call. It's up to you. Just think about it, sort it out. We'll help you. And the fact that they've even got their own sort of language around it, create and share a death wish, which I think is quite funny. So just quite unusual for a brand to try and bring humor into end of life stuff. And it definitely wouldn't be for everyone. But again, that is another really interesting aspect of a successful brand voice, that actually it's just as important who you put off as who you attract. Because actually we all know that's a wider principle of marketing, that having a real clear sense of who your target audience is really important. And so actually being able to know these guys are who we want to attract. So these guys, it really doesn't matter if we put them off. And in fact, let's go ahead and put them off and be really clear about who we're trying to attract. A good brand voice can be really helpful for that. And then final example, I've actually used something from my own website, just looking at two different companies. Actually this time companies not in the same space, but just two companies having a little note about cookies on the website. We've all come across the millions of those. So on my website, the little pop-up says, yes, it's those goddamn cookies again. If lockdown has really left you so bored you want to read my whole privacy policy, then hey, party on. Otherwise, just know that I use basically the same cookies as everyone else on the World Wide Web, so I can learn things from how people use my site. Now feel free to click on the X and get on with your day. And then we've got one from Innocent Smoothies. I'm sure you guys all know them. Yep, another cookie policy. We use cookies to personalize what you see, count what people click on, and share that with our partners. You can read our cookie policy here. It's nearly as exciting as this. And actually, I must admit, when I copied this, I didn't look at where this goes. I imagine from other things I've seen on their website that it goes to some sort of amusing game or video, since they do have a lot of quirky stuff on their site. So different in the sense that obviously my industry and the smoothie industry, very different, but pretty basic, same as the contact page stuff. You know, pretty much everyone's site has a pop-up cookie thing. But the tone that I've gone for is a much more kind of eye roll sort of, yep, it's the goddamn cookies again. Do you really want to read my privacy policy? You know, feel free, but seriously, just get on with your day. Do we really care? And also a slightly sort of retro vibe with the kind of party on, and, you know, ironically referring to it as the World Wide Web, just a slight sort of, not exactly sarcastic, but a kind of, come on, we're all a bit fed up of the cookie policies, let's just move on sort of tone. Whereas Innocent, in keeping with their very light, sort of quirky, fun, playful style, kept things very straightforward. So they've got, yep, another cookie policy, but not quite as sort of sarcastic as what I've chosen to go for. And then they keep things very clear, very simple. We use cookies to personalize what you see, count what people click on, share that with our partners. You can read our cookie policy. So they mostly just keep it simple. Then we just a little twist at the end. It's nearly as exciting as this. And it's that sort of quirkiness of, oh, what's this going to be? And then, as I said, I'm pretty sure when you click on it, it takes you to some kind of, they have like a fun generator or something on their website that's quite amusing, that just shows you random videos and GIFs and things that you might find amusing. Classic Innocent. So kind of rattled through those, just keeping an eye on the time. And hopefully those were helpful, interesting, just really, really small examples, but good ways, all of them, of seeing that no matter what we're talking about, whether it's the simplest piece of text or the most complicated, that actually we do have a choice about not just what we're saying, but how we're saying it, the particular language we're using, and that it does, as we saw hopefully in all those cases, very strongly paint a picture of what we're like, of what's going on behind the product or the service that we're offering. Now, what I do want to do just before we get to our last section, where we're actually going to look in a bit more detail about, okay, so I've rambled on for ages about how exciting and fun and interesting brand voice stuff is. How do you actually put it into action? Is I just want to kind of go over two key points that I think are really, really important about brand voice that potentially you may have sort of picked up as we've gone through, but just to hammer those home. So the first one of those, the first important thing to be aware of, is that having a brand voice is not optional, it's inevitable. And it is really important to understand this, because obviously every marketing person likes to think that their particular area of marketing is really important, you know, whether it's video marketing or social media or PI, like you've got to have this, you've got to have this, you won't have marketing success without this thing. Of course, we all think that, that's how marketeers work. But this is one of those areas where it actually really is vital to your marketing strategy to think about your brand voice, because you can't not have one. So with something like, shall we use video in our marketing? You might say yes, you might say no, depends what you want to achieve. Should we be on Twitter or not? Maybe yes, maybe no. Should we have a voice or not? Not an applicable question. You have got one already. If you use words to tell people about what your company does, you will have a voice, because that is the way language works. All words not only have a literal meaning, but they have a whole series of connotations, a whole series of ideas that they conjure up in our mind alongside their literal meaning. So whatever you say and however you say it, people will walk away with an impression of your brand. Now, it might not be an accurate impression, and it might not be an impression that they particularly like, but they will walk away thinking something about you. You do have a voice. You are giving people an impression of an organizational personality. Your only choice is whether it's an accurate voice, whether it's painting an authentic picture of what you're like, and whether it's a compelling voice, whether it's painting a picture of a personality that really connects with people. Those are your only options. You can't go, I don't really feel like we've got time for a brand voice. I think we won't bother. So sorry to land that little bomb of bad news on you, but there it is. And then the second point, we sort of alluded to this already about it not really being about personal opinion, but I really do want to hammer that home, that when it comes to brand voice, it isn't really about good or bad, like that's a good brand voice or that's not a good brand voice. It is very much about authenticity. It's about developing a way of speaking that accurately represents what you're like as an organization. So you can't force that. You can't sort of say, and believe me, I have had this, you know, brands come and going, oh, we just feel like we need to kind of connect with young people a bit more, and we need to like be a bit cooler. And so I think we just need to sound a bit more like innocent. Not going to work. Unless your company is actually like that, then developing a voice that's like that is just going to be really inauthentic and isn't going to work, and people are going to see through that quite quickly as soon as they come into actual contact with your company and realize that that's not what you're like. So the key with brand voice is authenticity, but also not just for the sake of a sort of consumer trust and honesty, but also I think it is quite easy to get these ideas in our head of, oh, it'd be really cool if our brand had a voice more like Brewdog or Oatly or whatever the cool voice is of the moment, and almost feel a bit sad, like, well, I'm just not sure our brand is that cool or is that whatever, and so feeling like maybe your brand voice isn't going to be as good. But actually, it isn't about that. It is about, as with all marketing things, the effectiveness of something, the success of something is measured in how it impacts customers and whether or not it influences them to buy in. And so depending on what you're like, what they're like, and what they need and want from you, those kind of cool voices might not work for you anyway, might not be what people need and want. Actually, I've got an example. I think actually I'm going to skip over that first one for a second. So I just want to look at this because I think this really hammers home what I'm talking about. This was an ad on the back of where we used to live. We used to get a little village newsletter that was sort of simultaneously the worst and the best thing that I've ever read. People were very concerned about a spate of Hoover thefts from local churches. I remember that being a big article once. I love that sort of thing. So this was an ad on the back of it, and it was for a carpet company, a local carpet company. And I remember reading it and just going, oh God. Okay, so for a start, it's all in bullet points. Wow. If you read down, I mean, it's just literally, you can imagine someone, literally a carpet guy, just kind of typing, we will bring samples to you, or you can come to the showroom, move all the furniture and replace it, uplift and dispose of old carpet, no obligation estimates, get the price, then decide, blah, 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 boom, go. And I love that. No pressure, no stress, no problem. Service like it used to be, remember? And with the exception of that lovely exclamation mark right at the end, there's not even any punctuation. It's pretty random. It's pretty terrible. Except that it sort of actually isn't terrible, as I later learned, because my curiosity piqued by this terrible ad. I asked around a bit and found out a bit about the company. And the thing was that they were very, very, very popular, very successful in our local area, particularly with older people or with families who'd lived in the area for a long time. And the things that made them popular were these things, the fact that they didn't do sales with unrealistic discounts, they didn't have all this fancy advertising and big full page color ads. They were just straight down the line. They said it like it was. They didn't waste their time on sort of sales speak and trying to persuade you, convince you. They just did a good job. And I must admit that when I read this, even without knowing that, whilst I thought to myself, oh gosh, this is kind of a terrible ad, I did also sort of think, oh, bless them. They're just clearly like a family-run company who I'm sure are really good at what they do, but flipping heck don't know anything about advertising. Well, that is completely accurate. So their writing created a totally accurate picture of what they were like. And actually, if they had had a fancy ad, beautifully written, well written in the more traditional sense, then actually, I don't think, well, I know that wouldn't have appealed to the main people who were their target audience. Most people liked them because they didn't go in for kind of marketing BS, and that they didn't care about marketing, they cared about good service. So there's definitely tons more to sort of flesh out about that example. And I'm not saying if I got my hands on this, I wouldn't change it at all. But actually, there is something to be said for that good doesn't always look like we think it's going to look. It's about authentically representing who you are as a business and making good connections with the people who you want to attract. And if you can tick those boxes, then whether or not it's as cool a voice as Innocent or whoever is actually not relevant. Now, I'm aware that we've not got too much time left and I want to cover these points. So I think probably about just over five minutes or so, and we should be able to cover these last points. Is that okay, Anna? Or are we going to eat too much into Q&A time?
No, that's absolutely fine. We've got one question that's come through, so we'll come back to that later once we do the Q&A. But yeah, no, that should work fine time-wise.
Great, cool, okay. Because obviously, this is probably the bit where you're like, come on, Beth, stop rabbiting on about all your strange village newsletters and just give us the goods. Tell us, how do we actually do this? Now, obviously, I want to give the fairly expected caveat up front, which is that normally when I work with clients on brand voice stuff, it's a process that at a minimum lasts weeks, often over a course of several months. It involves lots of thinking, lots of writing, lots of questioning. It is more than a quick sort of do these 5 things and your brand voice will be sorted. But I'm sure you're all smart enough to know that. But what I hope to give you today is just, I've got kind of 5 almost kind of key steps of however long each one takes you and whoever helps you do it and however you manage that step. These are the basic sort of hooks you're going to need to hang things on as you go through a process if you want to start thinking about brand voice. So the first one is this idea that you need to sort of look around and see what's happening with your voice now. So we touched on this earlier, that having a voice is not optional. So you may not think you have one already, but you do. And so taking the time to look through your current communications, and whether it's something you do yourself, something you do as a team, where you ask other employees, if you've got quite a big company, do some internal surveys, whether you find ways to ask your customers, existing or potential, there's huge opportunities in there for who you talk to and how you gather this intel, but just getting a sense of actually at the moment, forgetting for a minute what we're talking about, what do we sound like? How are we coming across? If you didn't know anything else about our company, you just looked at a few pages on our website or followed our social media for a week or read this blog, what impression would you leave with? And just get a sense of what is our voice at the moment? What sort of organizational personality are we currently communicating? And then that will just give you a sense of whether you leave that going, oh, actually, yeah, we're pretty much there. We need a bit of tweaking, but actually, yeah, that's pretty accurate. Or sadly, what is more common, more likely, is that you suddenly go, oh, okay, that's really different than what we thought. That's not the personality we want to be projecting at all. That's really different from reality. So it just gives you a sense of sort of where you are now and how far you've got to go to where you want to be. Then the second step is in some ways quite an amorphous sort of one. There's lots of different ways to go about this, but it's then thinking with that intel in mind, okay, this is how we're sort of coming across at the moment, but how do we want to be coming across? It's a sort of scrutinizing, a mining of your brand identity to say, what are we actually like? How do we want people to be viewing us? What do we want them to go away thinking about us? And it's really important in this section to go beyond the standard sort of brand values of, well, we're professional and we've got integrity and we're people first and all that kind of stuff, which those things are fine. Those things are great as brand values. Of course, it's important for a brand to be honest and to put people first. Great, thumbs up. But loads of brands have those values, and that's fine. Your values don't need to be distinctive. But the question is, what's the personality? Me and another human being could have the exact same set of values, but we might live out those values completely differently. We might have a very different personality. And so that's the thing when you look at this step of what do we want to communicate? How do we want to come across? Make sure you are focusing on that sense of brand personality rather than a wider thing of brand values, although of course those form a background. This one, step 3, learn your people's lingo, is very much related to what we were talking about earlier, that brand voice is sort of that connecting the two elements of who you are and what you're like, and then the people that you want to talk to, and finding a way to make those points of connection. And so part of that is that obviously with that second step, you want to be thinking about what you're like as a brand and how you want to communicate, what you want to get across. But you also do need to be thinking about who it is you're talking to and thinking about what are those points of connection that they might be looking for, and particularly what's the language that is going to enable those points of connection. So this can often be a real downfall in areas where maybe particularly service stuff, although actually maybe products too, where there's maybe a real specialist language around it, so like medical jargon or legal jargon or financial jargon, just even basically understanding how much of this language will my audience understand. Maybe if you're B2B, let's say you're an accountant or a financial firm that's aimed at other accountants, well then that level of knowledge of subject specific language is going to be very high. Whereas if you're aiming at the sort of everyday person in the street, then obviously you might have to take into account that there's a whole bunch of terminology they might not understand. And then also just familiarizing yourself with their context and just, getting that sense of what kind of language mirrors what they use day to day, and what kind of language is going to make sense to them and appeal to them and draw them in, and what kind of language is really going to put them off. Super example, I thought of this earlier because we were looking at the period brand things. So just personally, okay, neither of those two brands we shared were exactly my thing, but I can tell you one thing that would put me off. I really, really don't like the word menstruating. It's very like school textbook kind of, not a fan. So if there was a period brand that, get your menstrual products here, out the window, not interested. Whereas other people might prefer that. They might prefer to just keep things as clinical as possible, because actually I don't need to be BFFs with my period brand. So everybody's different. You've got to understand your audience, but what is the language that is going to resonate with them and attract them, and what's the language that's going to put them off? Make sure you've got your head around that. And step 4 is less of a step and more of a very messy, chaotic kind of chance to be creative. But it's a really important one, because I think it is very easy for brand voice stuff to stay very theoretical. So it to be a sort of, okay, we've looked at all our stuff, we've got our nice little list of words of personality attributes of what we're like, and we've done a few little sort of guidelines, and boom, there we go. when actually what we're talking about is developing something that is supposed to be the backbone of all of your communications. So all of your bits of writing and speaking. And so if you don't take the time to actually be creative and play around with things and have a go at writing stuff and just see what sounds right and what feels right, then you're actually going to end up with either quite a clinical process or a process that doesn't really permeate the day-to-day communications of your company. So actually, just whether it's you on your own, your team, some other people you know and trust, I don't know people's contexts, how many other people you have working with you, but whether you hire in a copywriter or someone like me or whatever, that just having that chance to play around with, okay, let's just take something simple like our contact page. Here's 5 different ways we could write it. Which one of those actually sounds and feels the most like us? And just take that chance to play around and to get creative. And then step 5 is that at some point, all of that creative stuff done, you are going to have to get something agreed. That's the way businesses work. Unless you are a solo business owner and you can sort of wing it a bit more, the chances are that you are going to have to get something that everyone can kind of sign off on and agree and then implement going forwards. And so whatever you want to call it, a sort of tone of voice toolkit, some brand voice guidelines, however you look at it, some kind of agreed, right, guys, this is who we are and what we like. This is how we want people to view us. And so here are some of the tips of how to write in order to make that happen. Here's some examples. Here's some do's and don'ts, something really fleshed out and really practical that means that all that brilliant thinking and writing and all that background work that you've done actually turns into something concrete and clear, that you're actually left with okay, this is our voice and here's how to actually bring it to life and make it work. Because I think otherwise, unfortunately, if you don't do that, you will find that it is a bit of a, well, that was a cool exercise we did one day on an away day, but it never gets any further and it doesn't really impact the day-to-day of business. So that was a whistle stop tour, and I'm sure you can ask some stuff in the questions, and if I've missed out anything, let me know. I think also Anna's probably going to share, or shared my website. I think so. If you want to get in touch with me, if you want to chat, if you want to ask questions, go for it. That was a lot to cover in 45 or 50 minutes, but we've got a little bit of a chance for questions now, and hopefully at least that was a good overview, good introduction. So thanks for listening. I assume you were listening. I can't see you. You might have been checking your emails the whole time.
No, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Beth. So yes, we do have some time for questions now. So you can either put them in the chat, or there is a specific Q&A function you can use as well. Please do ask some. We've already had one come in from Sarah. Let me just check whether she is still actually. Yes, she is still here. That's good. So she's asked, if you, the marketer, personally are the voice of the company, but have about 30 employees who don't interact on social media, how can you present a consistent and unified collective voice? And how do you encourage employees to participate? She suggested brand ambassador guidelines, but yes, if you could elaborate on that, that would be fantastic.
Okay. I mean, that is,
sorry, it's a big one.
That is a big question. So it's a really good question, but it's a really big question. I mean, I think the most helpful way to answer it, given that we don't have time for a longer conversation, is just to say that it is really important that actually you try and move the voice to a place where it does go beyond just being you. Obviously, I don't have any idea what kind of business you're in or any more details about what your context is, but the reality is for most businesses, there are actually a huge variety of external communications, way more than people think, even just personal emails going in and out of the company, phone calls, signs that get put up in reception by the admin team, or just whatever. There's loads and loads of different points where actually it won't be you, it will be other people communicating. And there is a job to be done. And I don't have enough time to completely sort of elaborate exactly how to do that job, but there is a job to be done of educating people that the voice of the company is not just something that sits with marketing. It's not just a little pet project that belongs to you and no one else really has to care about it, because it is to do with how the company as a whole is viewed and engaged with. And that consistency thing we talked about, the fact that people have to come across that personality at every possible touch point, even the ones that people don't think about, like email signatures and small print and privacy policies and terms and conditions in client contracts and all that kind of stuff. It has to be everywhere. So it shouldn't be just you. It should be something everyone takes ownership of and feels responsibility for. But there's no question that that is a job of how to do that. And I know this doesn't particularly help everyone else on the chat, but if you want to talk a little bit more about that, I'm happy to give you a bit more of a breakdown of some tips of how to try and get people to take ownership of that a bit more, because it isn't, unfortunately, it's not a quick thing, it's not a one-shot thing, but the key is you might meet with a bit of resistance. It might be something where people go, oh, what, that, no, that's a marketing thing. You don't, but you have to find a way to help them understand that they do also need to pay attention to that and share ownership of it. It isn't just a marketing thing, it's a whole organizational thing. But sorry, that isn't actually necessarily that helpful.
No, that's great. She just clarified that she works for a university, so yeah, I think that's quite relevant.
Yeah.
We have a question from Cara, who's asked, how do you decide on what colours to use when doing a rebrand? Does this fit into your brand voice?
Interesting. It does, in the sense of, it doesn't, I wouldn't say it's a specific part of brand voice, but obviously it's a wider question about your brand identity and personality, that there are a number of different ways of presenting, of indicating to people what you are like as a brand, and there is absolutely a visual element to that as well as a verbal element, and obviously the important thing is that those two things work together. So it slightly depends how a company tackles things. To be honest, a lot of the time my work is that I'm brought in the context of a company doing a wider rebrand, so they're also looking at their visual identity, and so at that point that sort of assessment of what is it that we want to be like, how do we want people to see us and engage with us, they're asking those questions in order to inform a visual process as well as a verbal process. So absolutely, I think the things need to be linked. I mean, there's not a sort of shortcut thing of, if you want to come across as cool and edgy, then use these colors, and if you want to come across as formal and premium and high quality, use these colors. You know, it's not quite as straightforward as that, but basically the idea that your visual identity and your verbal identity should both be different ways of painting a picture of that core organizational identity is absolutely linked. So in that sense, yes, they are related.
Yeah, of course, that makes sense. We haven't got any other questions for the time being, but I have one just out of interest.
Yeah.
I was wondering, how did you decide on your own brand voice for your website? Because I've had a look at it, it stands out immediately. It's fun, it's friendly, it's quite witty, jokey. So I was wondering how you came up with that.
Well, I was about to say, well, that's just my personality, but given that you've just said so many nice things, that feels a little but I think it is, I'll be absolutely the first to say, I think it's a lot easier when you're like a solo business owner or a freelancer or a consultant, because I'm not having to sort of go through committee, I'm not having to talk to other people and assess what a sort of corporate personality is. I'm much more free in how I can communicate, but admittedly in a slightly different way. I did go through a similar sort of process. That for me, it was then about deciding, like, okay, there's Beth, the human being, but then there's also Beth, the company. There's Bethany Joy, the business. And for me, it was about sort of saying, okay, this is who I am and this is who I want the business to be. And where's the overlap in that Venn diagram? How do I make sure I'm bringing the right parts of my personality into the business and making those key bits the ones that are visible? And so still some thought and some thinking and some writing and creativity, all that same sort of process did actually go into it, but it's just a little bit easier for me because I was just drawing on my own personality rather than trying to identify a corporate personality, which is definitely harder.
Yeah, no, I can see that would be the case. I don't think we have any other questions. Antonia says thank you, so that's lovely. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So in that case, I will quickly round up everything. I'm just going to put some links in the chat. So yeah, thank you very much to everyone who's joined us today. I hope you did find it interesting and enjoyable. We'll send out the recording and the slide deck in the next couple of days. So if you do have any questions, just drop us an email, and we have the inquiries email should be in the chat as well. Lots of you have already expressed interest in studying a PR course with us. Some of you will probably already be enrolled with us as well. So if you do want to find out more about the PR courses that we offer and kind of cover more interesting topics like we've just had today, then yeah, just get in touch with us. We'd be very happy to chat, and we'd be delighted to get you enrolled. I'll just do a quick last check to see what's going on in the chat. Just lots of people saying thank you. Perfect, that's great. So yeah, thank you very much to everyone who's joined, and thank you again to Bethany. That was really interesting and really informative. So yeah, I hope everyone has a lovely day, and yeah, we hope to hear from some of you soon.
Great. All right. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.